All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Wolf podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our preview and prediction for the NC State Wolfpack. Looking at the coaching staff, Dave Doran's back for his 10th season, 64-49 mark overall. Tim Beck's the offensive coordinator, his third year. And then defensive coordinator Tony Gibson. This will also be his third season. A very nice staff here Doran has assembled and been able to keep together. Pretty quiet offseason, though, mainly in the portal. Only 4 entries, and they had 3 ads. Look at the offense. Devin Leary, Nick, this guy progressed tremendously, 3,400 yards. 35 touchdowns, only had 5 interceptions. His accuracy and top-notch toughness reigned supreme over these opponents last year. I like his touch as well. Larry doesn't possess great physical tools as he's quite limited to being a pocket passer. Velocity and zip, those things also kind of waver. The throws where he attempts to throw downfield, so that's going to be a big focal point area to try and improve on this season. What were your thoughts about Devin Leary last season? Really shined.
Devin Leary stepped up to the plate last year. He definitely had a shaky time so far in Raleigh. His freshman year only completed 48% of his passes in 8 games and just looked poor across the board and didn't seem like he was going to be the future quarterback for the Wolfpack. But last year, 35 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, about 8 yards per attempt in the air, nearly 3,500 yards passing. Like you said, more of a pocket passer, doesn't really do a whole lot on the ground, can't really get out of the pocket, so he is limited in that regard, and they're going to have to definitely keep that in mind when they structure this offense, but they definitely designed their offense around him and built it something that he can kind of be a pocket passer and succeed in. I like to see him take a step forward this year even more. 35-5 was a very impressive ratio. I think he can improve that this year.
He was really good in 4 games in 2020 as well, but he got hurt. I believe he got hurt on the same play he threw a touchdown on. He had 890 yards, 8 touchdowns, only 2 picks. I thought he was certainly showcasing that improvement. Weren't able to see the rest of the year, but he came out guns blazing last year. Like you said, phenomenal work from the stat sheet. And, he really carried this team at times. The running game was not always strong, but they do lose those top 2 rushers. 92% of rushing production departs in Ricky Person and Zoe Knight. Jordan Houston, though, 20 touches last year, 500-plus yards in 2019. Very low usage since that year, but he's a 5'10", 109-pound guy who's not a 3-down player, but he's quite fresh, and he's been around a long time. So they have some big expectations for Jordan Houston. He might be quicker than the 2 backs they had last year. That's kind of been the word on campus. Demi Sumo, he's a bigger back. He seems to be nice complementary here to Jordan Houston.
It definitely is normal to expect a drop from this running production when you lose 92% of your production in a single offseason. I like what he has as a potential running back. I think Houston's a talented back. I have heard the same things from NC State fans. This kid has potential. They really like to see what they see out of him. The touches are limited. Hasn't had a whole lot of experience. Made little plays here in a couple appearances here and there. Played about 8 games last year. I think he has the potential to step up. I like what he has in the speed department. I think he's a talented back, has some nice speed, but it's tough to tell at this point because just the reps aren't there, and then they're really starting from fresh basically with this running core.
It's not like they ran the ball overly great last year. Both backs had 630-plus yards, only 126 yards per game, though, as a team, over 4 yards per carry. It's just the nature of the offense. They liked to air it out. That was what Tim Beck liked to do a lot last year, even in games against Wake Forest, where I picked them to win, and they just would not commit to the run one bit, even though they were having success. They just did not want to do that. Only 18 carries in that game where Devin Leary was flaming them. The defense was playing very well. They just would not commit to running the football. That's something I want to see more out of them this year, especially with the offensive line they have. Ike Mukwano, he's gone. Both tackles are replaced, so those spots are up for grabs. But Chandler Zavala, 6'5", 325, he's fighting for eligibility. He appears good to go. He's on roster, at least what I'm seeing. He's at left guard. They struggled a bit when he went down, so getting him back's big. Anthony Belton, 6'6", 330, might be the ideal replacement for Ike Mukwano with his size. They like his athleticism. Bryson Spees, he might be the starter early, though. He's a senior. That experience gives him a leg up. The biggest part of this offensive line, though, Grant Gibson, one of the nation's top centers. He's a great run blocker. It's going to be tough to be as great as they were last year, but I don't expect much fall off from this offensive line despite losing a top 10 draft selection.
It is difficult to replace top 10 draft selection, but I think that the talent on this offensive line is there, and the production should stay the same. They should be able to get those run blocks in perfectly. I think Spears is probably the starter here at left tackle, but Belton has a serious potential. I love his size. Maybe he finds a way to slot in if the production at left tackle is down. I like what they have at center. I think Gibson's a really talented center. I think he has some serious potential on the right side. With McMahon and McKay are definitely talented as well, both redshirt sophomores that have some experience.
Yeah, both those guys on the right side. Being redshirt sophomores, been around a little bit, but still not the most experienced. Be just fine this season. That's going to be a big area for them to watch because the offensive line kind of dictates how this team likes to operate. Looking at the receiving core, they lose Amika Emezi, but everyone else, they're kind of back. Thayer Thomas, he's a slot guy, although likely be used outside more. He's only 6', 197, so we'll see. Devin Carter been very consistent over the past 3 years. Coming off a career season, 6'3", 216. He's probably a better fit for that X-wide receiver. And then they had Darryl Jones from Maryland, 23 receptions for 300 yards last year. Didn't do much in his years at Maryland before the transfer. Maybe a fresh start here is exactly what he needs. He brings speed, though, as does Anthony Smith. Porter Rook's a guy they want to get on the field. They love his talent and his overall athleticism. Thayer Thomas, though, 8 touchdowns last year. He had 51 receptions for 556 yards. Him and Carter, they've been big focal points of this offense the past couple of years, and I think they're one of the top duos in the nation.
I like Carter's production, 17.9 yards per catch last year, 6 touchdowns from him. I like to see what he can do. I like his size. I think he has some serious potential as well. Thomas, though, solid wide receiver, 11.7 yards per catch, 8 touchdowns from him as well. And I definitely think that Porter Rook's a guy to look at here. Almost 300 yards last year, about 13 yards per catch. I think he has some serious potential to kind of step up and be a bit of a wild card wide receiver for this team.
Yeah, they really like him. I like what they have. Overall, they have the 5 guys we just mentioned. I really like them. Depth isn't, overly impressive, but maybe there's some guys I like to get involved. At tight end, I kind of like what they have. Trent Penix, he's going to make that conversion from running back to the tight end position, 6'3", 236, 16 receptions, 236, and 3 touchdowns. Almost all that production came over the final 5 games. So I expect big things from him this season. Christopher Toddley as well, 6'4", 240, had 4 touchdowns. He's a bigger red zone threat. So I like the 2 tight ends they have. Pretty good compliments to this wide receiver group. Overall, I'm very impressed with this offense. They do lose those 2 running backs and a bookend left tackle, but I think 33 points per game, they will certainly improve upon that this fall. How are you feeling about that?
I like the production for this offense. I think they have the talent to add some points. I think this seems to be a high-scoring, definitely going to air the ball out a lot this year. I like the wide receiving core they have. I think they'll pick up the slack if there's any sort of drop in production on the running back, and I think when a quarterback that's going to only get more polished as time passes on, this is a great offense for the NC State Wolfpack.
And looking at the defense, that is the reason everyone's high on this team. They get 10 starters back on what was a phenomenal unit last year. To start with the trenches, they're 23rd in FBS against the run. They were 75th in 2020 despite having a first-team defensive tackle, Aylin McNeil. They were able to lose him, and they got better, mainly because Corey Durden, he's not a stat sheet warrior, but he was more of a player that frees things up around him. 6'4", 310, had 31 stops and 4.5 tackles for loss last year, but very similar to McNeil with the ability to fight through double teams. You just draw a crowd. That's really what he was able to provide. I like Corey Durden there. And you look at guys like Savion Jackson, 6'2", 290, should continue to ascend. C.J. Clark, very excited about him. Only played in 3 games at nose tackle, but his impact was evident. Davin Vann, he's versatile. He can play anywhere on this line. 4.5 sacks, 9 QB hurries. He's an athletic specimen they like. Then Joshua Harris, 6'4", 325. Plenty of size in him. I absolutely love this defensive line group. The scheme they run is 3-3-5, so you're not going to see all these guys on the field. But in terms of depth and starters, I love what they have, and they have guys that are continue to get better.
The depth is definitely there. I like Savion Jackson, 23 total tackles last year, plus 1.5 tackles for loss. I think he has some serious talent. Corey Durden, like you said, isn't a guy that lights up the stat sheet, but 3.5 sacks last year, not too bad to see from him. I definitely like that production. I think he can step up and maybe get 5 or 6 this year. I like him, like his potential a whole lot. These guys, I like the way they're going to be able to kind of rotate. The depth is there. You guys will get some different amount of playing time, different games here and there, and I think there's some serious potential with this team.
And the reason this front 6 is one of the nation's best is because of the linebacking core. They get back Peyton Wilson, who was hurt in the 3rd game of the year last year. Isaiah Moore was great until getting hurt after 7 games, so they struggled with health. Those guys combined for well over 200 tackles in 2020. But the biggest thing that happened with those guys getting hurt is it allowed Drake Thomas to shine. End of the year with 99 tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss, and 3 picks. This guy was phenomenal. Ends the year as one of the nation's top linebackers. Made plays in coverage, was even better against the run. And that also allowed guys like Jalen Scott late in the year to be a starter. Devin Beatty as well, 39 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss. So kind of like the defensive line, you got great starters and great depth. This front 6 is as good as it comes.
Drake Thomas led the team in tackles for loss, total tackles, and was tied for the team lead in sacks with 6, 3 interceptions as well. This guy can do it all across the field, covers every stat very well. I love the talent he has. I also think Beatty is a solid player, 7.5 tackles for loss, plus a sack in there as well, in addition to his 39 total tackles. These guys are great. The depth is great with the linebacking core. It's one of the nation's best, definitely one of the best in the ACC as well. I love the talent here, and I think they have a serious amount of production they can produce.
And then you look at a secondary that has taken major strides in Doran's tenure. They were 2nd last year in FBS in opponent completion rate. It's pretty crazy to just rave about the front 6 like that, and then you hear a stat like that. And here's another one. 100% of snaps are back in the secondary. They don't lose anybody. And Shaheem Battle leads the way. He was good in 2020. Continued to get better last year. Locked down CB1. They like what they have on there. CB2, though, might be a little shaky. Tyler Baker-Williams, though, I really like him at nickel. Last year he really proved that he could be reliable in that. Sean Smith, Derek Pitts, both veterans, seniors. I think Pitts has that job, but it's probably the biggest concern in the secondary because at safety, this is a very phenomenally talented area on the roster because Tanner Engel, it's a first-team ACC a year ago. He had 70 tackles. He is back, and he didn't have to come back, but he has big expectations. He wants a championship. Cyrus Fagan, Devon Boykin, those guys will occupy the other safety spot. They've both proven to be plenty capable.
Yeah, Battle, Pitts, and Baker Williams all had 2 interceptions each last year. They definitely played well together. I like what these guys can do. They return 100%, like you said. I love that cohesion. I love that ability to bring back guys, get returners, get guys comfortable, more experience for these guys. They work well together. They play well together. Each of them having 2 interceptions per person. Very talented there. I think the secondary is going to be one of the best in the ACC as well.
Looking at the game log, they got torn up against Miami. They struggled a bit against Mississippi State. LA Tech had some success in a game that really shouldn't have been close, but for some reason it was. But late in the year, this secondary was phenomenal. Look what they did against Wake Forest, the game they lost. But they really had Sam Hartman's number, 42% completion rate. We had 290 yards, and they also had 3 picks in that game. So they also had 15 picks on the year. So this secondary proved to be great all year long. You mix all this together on the D-line, at linebacker, at secondary. This is one of the nation's top defenses, Nick, by far.
Absolutely love this defensive production, top to bottom is there. These guys are getting in your face. They're going to make a lot of stops. Super talented on both the passing and run defense. I think there's a lot of potential here for these guys to even get better throughout the season.
It's an interesting schedule. They get UConn sandwiched in between Texas Tech and Clemson. They have 3 straight home games late in the year, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, and Boston College. And then they have 2 road games to end the year against Louisville and UNC. And if this team is 10-0 leading into those final 2 road games, knowing college football, they're almost guaranteed to lose one of those games, it feels like. They're not exactly a great draw, I'd say, getting Louisville and UNC on the road. I have 12-0 for NC State. I think this offense will continue to get better. Devin Leary shined last year, and they're not losing a whole bunch in the receiving core. I think the passing attack will continue to grow. I really don't need to talk much more about the defense. They are great in every level. They have great depth, great talent. These guys should be one of the top 3 defenses in college football. It's an elite unit. I have them going undefeated and making the playoffs. How do you feel about that?
I think the playoffs might be a little bit of a stretch for this team. I just look at those last 2 games at Louisville, at UNC. That is a very tough draw to get 2 games back-to-back on the road like that, especially Louisville. I think they have a lot of underrated talent. A lot of people are kind of sleeping on this team. A bit of different expectations for them. I think they'll drop one of those 2 games, if not both of them, potentially. I like the schedule overall. I think it's a very interesting schedule because they get Texas Tech out of conference. They get on the road at Clemson, on the road at Syracuse. Definitely an interesting draw with those 2 teams as well. Heading to East Carolina to start the season. A bit of an interesting pick from them to stay in the region. I think that 12-0 is definitely within reach, but for me, I'm going to be a little more conservative and go 10-2 with them dropping the last 2 games this season against Louisville and UNC, which would be a bit of a whimper to end out their season.
Now, that'd be shocking to see them lose both of those games on the road, and you also have them beating Clemson like I do on the road. That's a game that could easily drop, but I think they'll get over the hump this year. They were able to last year, even though their offense couldn't do much. I don't know. We'll see what happens there against the Tigers, but I do have them going 12-0, but I wouldn't be shocked one bit if they lost one of those games. But in the CFP era, everyone gets a freebie late in the year. That'd be a very unfortunate loss, especially since the schedule, at least on paper, isn't overly impressive. I do think that playoffs for NC State, hopefully they can live up to the expectations because a lot of people are overhyping this team. It feels like I was high on them last year, and I'm high on them again this year. So a lot more attention, a lot more eyes on Dave Doran's group. They've had great teams in the past and have been unable to deliver, at least from a conference championship standpoint. So I think this year they get over the hump, get things done. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.